Germany expected a firefight. Across the frozen, unforgiving expanse of the Eastern Front, that was the grim and unalterable arithmetic of war. An advance met resistance. Patrols clashed. Defenses were tested by artillery and armor. The scream of shells, the staccato rattle of machine guns, the frantic shouts of men locked in a desperate struggle, these were the constants. This was the terrible symphony of combat the Wehrmacht had come to know and to expect. But on one frigid morning in January 1945, in a silent, snow-choked forest on the border of East Prussia, that arithmetic failed. The expected symphony never began. Instead, everything went silent. To understand the profound unease born of that silence, we must first understand the men who heard it, and the catastrophic strategic situation in which they found themselves. It is January 13, 1945. For the German forces on the Eastern Front, this is the beginning of the end. The Soviet Red Army, having shattered Army Group Center the previous summer, has paused, regrouped, and stockpiled a staggering arsenal on the banks of the Vistula River. Their objective, not merely to advance but to annihilate. This is the opening phase of the Vistula-Oder offensive, a Soviet steamroller of unimaginable scale, aimed directly at the heart of Germany itself. Facing this onslaught is the Fourth Army, part of the shattered remnants of Army Group Center, now cynically redesignated Army Group North. Among its battered formations is the 28th Jaeger Division, a light infantry unit already worn thin by years of brutal warfare. One of its forward outposts is the 49th Jaeger Regiment, tasked with holding a sector of the front line near the small East Prussian town of Schlossberg. The land is a monochrome nightmare. Dense, ancient forest, a mix of pine and skeletal birch, blanketed by over a meter of snow. The temperature hovers around -20 degrees Celsius. The air is so cold it hurts to breathe. The men of the 49th are veterans. They know the signs of an impending attack. 4 days, Soviet reconnaissance probes have increased in frequency and aggression. The distant, constant rumble of truck engines beyond the Soviet lines has been a 24-hour dirge, the unmistakable sound of a massive buildup. Radio intercepts chatter with new, unidentified Soviet unit designations. Every forward observer expects it. The storm is coming. And they, in their frozen foxholes and hastily fortified log bunkers, are directly in its path. Their orders are the same as every unit on the crumbling front: hold at all costs. But these Jaeger know their thinly spread lines, their limited ammunition, and their lack of substantial armor or artillery support make that order a potential death sentence. They are the anvil. And the Soviet hammer is poised to fall. Dawn on January 14 brings no warmth, only a pale, sickly light that does little to illuminate the deep shadows of the forest. The sentries of the 49th Jaeger Regiment, wrapped in every piece of clothing they possess, strain their eyes and ears. They are waiting for the prelude. They know the Soviet doctrine by now. First, the artillery. A hurricane of fire, the Uragani Ogon, an opening barrage of such density and ferocity it is designed not just to destroy defenses, but to erase the very landscape, to shatter nerves and bury men alive in their own positions. Then, under cover of that hellstorm, the infantry would advance, followed by waves of T-34 tanks to punch through any remaining strongpoints. By 0800 hours, the tension is a physical weight. Lieutenant Gerhard Brandt, commander of the regiment's 2nd Battalion, scans the ominous tree line 500 meters to his east through his battered field glasses. His men have reported movement all night, shadows flitting between the trees, the glint of something metallic, the occasional quickly stifled sound of a diesel engine. The intelligence briefing at division headquarters had been bleak. They were facing elements of the Soviet 5th Guards Tank Army, a seasoned, ruthless formation that had spearheaded the drive across Ukraine. They could expect at least a full rifle regiment, supported by a battalion of T-34-85s, possibly even the new fearsome Stalin heavy tanks. By 1000 hours, the anticipation has become agony. Every veteran soldier's instinct screamed that the attack is imminent. The usual morning Soviet harassment fire, a few random mortar shells, has not come. The forest opposite is not just quiet, it is profoundly silent. The birds, sensitive to movement and vibration, have fled. The wind has died down, leaving an oppressive, crystalline stillness. Men check and recheck their weapons. The reliable Mauser Kar 98K rifles, the few precious MP-40 submachine guns, the heavy MG-42 machine guns whose belts of ammunition are already laid out in the snow, ready to feed the hungry weapon. The Panzerfaust teams huddle by their positions, their hollow charge rockets the only hope against the anticipated Soviet armor. At 1100 hours, a young Gefreiter, his face pale beneath a crust of frost, whispers to his squad leader, "Unter off ear. I can't hear anything. Not a thing." It's true. The constant, background rumble of Soviet logistics has ceased. The silence is now total, broken only by the occasional creak of a tree limb weighted with snow. This is not the silence of inactivity. This is the silence of a predator holding its breath before the strike. Lieutenant Brandt radios his company commanders. "Be ready. It will begin any minute." He anticipates the first screech of the Katyusha rockets, the Stalin's organ, a sound that chills the blood of even the most hardened veteran. He waits. His knuckles are white on the field telephone. But the only sound is the static on the line. Noon passes. The sun, a weak silver disk, reaches its pathetic zenith. The men, keyed up for a fight, begin to feel a different, more insidious emotion: dread. The psychological toll of waiting for an inevitable attack is immense. But waiting for an attack that does not come, within a silence that feels unnatural and wrong, is somehow worse. It defies all their experience, all their understanding of the enemy. Where is the bombardment? Where are the shrill whistles signaling the infantry advance? Rumors, the soldier's constant companion, begin to flutter down the line. "Maybe they've called it off," one man mutters, hope warring with disbelief. "Perhaps the weather grounded their air support," suggests another. A more veteran, grim voice counters, "Or they're already behind us." This last terrifying thought takes root. The 49th's positions are linear, dug into a forward slope overlooking a shallow, snow-filled valley. Their flanks are nominally tied in with neighboring units, but in such dense terrain, gaps are inevitable. The silence isn't an absence of attack. Could it be the signature of a deep, infiltrating maneuver? By 1400 hours, patrols are cautiously ordered forward. A squad from the 1st Company, moving with painstaking slowness through the knee-deep snow, reaches the abandoned Soviet forward positions they had observed for days. They are empty. Not just abandoned but cleared. Spent cartridge casings, empty ration tins, the detritus of a military presence, all of it is gone. Only cold, disturbed snow and the ghostly impressions of where foxholes and gun emplacements once were remain. It is as if a ghost army had simply vanished. The reports from the patrol send a wave of cold fear, deeper than any winter chill, through the German command post. The enemy is not in front of them. Lieutenant Brandt's mind races through the tactical possibilities, each one more alarming than the last. A massive feint? A regrouping for an even heavier, concentrated blow on another sector? Or the worst-case scenario, a deep, penetrating encirclement? The radio crackles to life. It is not good news. Fragmented, chaotic reports begin to filter in from regiment, from division, from adjacent units. To the north, the thunder of a colossal artillery barrage rolls across the horizon, the sound the men of the 49th had been waiting for, but it is distant, miles away. The main Soviet blow is falling elsewhere. Then the pieces of the nightmare puzzle begin to snap together. Reports speak of Soviet spearheads, not in front of the 28th Jaeger Division's prepared defenses, but to its south and north, moving with shocking speed. They have bypassed the fortified lines entirely, exploiting the difficult forest terrain the Germans believed would slow any large-scale advance. By 1600 hours, as the early winter darkness begins to seep into the forest, the crisis is fully understood. The silence in front of the 49th Jaeger Regiment was not a reprieve, it was the sound of strategic obsolescence. The Soviet 5th Guards Tank Army had not attacked their position head-on. Instead, using the dense woodland as cover and leveraging their overwhelming numerical superiority, they had identified the weak seams between German units. Powerful mobile formations, led by tanks and mounted on trucks, had infiltrated through these gaps during the night and the early morning fog. Now they were driving hard to the west, not east. Their objective was not to engage the 49th Regiment, but to ignore it, to slash behind it, and to secure the key road and rail junctions at the town of Gumbinnen, deep in the German rear. The men of the 49th are not facing an attack. They are facing envelopment and annihilation. They are in danger of being cut off, surrounded, and reduced to a kessel, a cauldron. Their defensive positions, meticulously prepared to face east, are now facing the wrong direction. Their supply lines, stretching back to the west, are likely already severed or under threat. The sheer, audacious scale of the Soviet maneuver is breathtaking. It renders their entire mission, to hold the line, utterly meaningless. They are not a bulwark, they are an island in a rising Soviet tide, about to be stranded and submerged. Fear, sharp and immediate, grips the men. It is one thing to face a frontal assault, to fight and die in your own foxhole. It is another to realize the war has moved past you, that you are alone, and that the enemy is now between you and home. Panicked questions ripple through the ranks. What are our orders? Do we hold? Do we pull back? Is there even a way back? Lieutenant Brandt receives frantic, contradictory instructions from regiment. First, hold your position. Then minutes later, prepare for a fighting withdrawal to the west. Then silence. The radio link to regiment goes dead. The link to division is pure static. They are on their own. The weight of command descends upon Brandt. To stay is to be encircled and destroyed. To move is to abandon fortified positions and march into the unknown, likely into the path of the very Soviet columns that have bypassed them. The forest, once a defensive asset, now feels like a trap, its dark avenues perfect for ambush. The snow, which muffled the sound of the Soviet approach, will now slow their own retreat to a crawl. They are low on fuel for their few vehicles. They have only what ammunition they carry. And the bitter cold is a relentless, equal opportunity enemy. In this moment the silence returns, but now it is inside the German lines. A silence of shock, of paralyzing uncertainty, of impending doom. Lieutenant Brandt makes his decision. It is not based on grand strategy, for that is now beyond his influence. It is based on the fundamental instinct of a Jaeger, survival and the preservation of his men. He will not wait to be encircled. He will not die in a pointless last stand for ground that has already been rendered irrelevant. His new mission is to extract his battalion from the closing Soviet pincers and attempt to re-establish contact with the German rear, if it still exists. But a blind, frantic dash westward is suicide. He needs information. He needs eyes. He calls for Oberjäger Karl Vogel, the commander of his recon platoon. Vogel, a wiry, cunning forester from the Black Forest in civilian life, is a ghost in the woodland. Brandt's orders are simple yet extraordinarily dangerous. Take your best men. Move west, not on the roads but through the thickest forest. Find the Soviet spearheads. Find a gap, a weak spot, an unguarded route. Get us a path out of here. Report back in 3 hours. As Vogel and his four-man team vanish into the twilight gloom of the pines, white camouflage suits making them spectral figures, the rest of the battalion prepares for movement. It is a torturous process. Weapons and essential supplies are gathered. Non-essential gear is destroyed. The wounded who cannot walk are a heart-rending problem, placed on makeshift sleds that will be dragged through the snow, slowing the entire column. For 2 agonizing hours, the battalion waits, a frozen, anxious mass of men listening to the distant, growing sounds of battle to the north and south. The battles they were meant to fight, now happening miles away. Then, a miracle. Oberjäger Vogel returns, his men exhausted but their eyes alight with a fierce hope. They had covered nearly 8 kilometers. They had witnessed a Soviet motorized column rumbling down a secondary road, but had also found something critical. A deep, narrow ravine choked with undergrowth and snow, that ran parallel to the road but was hidden from it. It was impassable for vehicles, but men on foot, moving single file, could use it. More importantly, it appeared to be between the axes of advance of 2 identified Soviet regiments. A seam in the enemy's own rapidly advancing front. This is the turning point. Brandt seizes on the intelligence. He issues crisp, urgent orders. The battalion will move not as a combat formation, but as an escape party. Absolute silence and light discipline are paramount. No smoking. No talking. Weapons are to be secured to prevent clattering. The column will follow Vogel's team into the ravine. They will move with the desperation of hunted men, but with the discipline of professionals. What happens next is a testament to the sheer, grim determination of the Jaeger. Under the cover of darkness and a mercifully light snowfall that covers their tracks, over 600 men begin their silent march to salvation. For 5 brutal hours they move through the frozen gully. The cold is bone-deep. Men stumble on hidden roots and rocks, biting back cries of pain. The wounded on the sleds moan softly, their pain muffled by blankets. Every distant engine noise, every far-off flare lighting the sky, freezes the column in place. They are mice moving between the paws of lions. They pass so close to a Soviet bivouac that they can smell the distinct odor of Russian tobacco and hear the murmur of voices. They dare not breathe. Step by tortuous step, they navigate the silent, hidden pathway that Oberjäger Vogel had found. Just before dawn on January 15th, the lead elements of the 2nd Battalion, 49th Jaeger Regiment, emerge from the forest near the village of Trakenen. Exhausted, frostbitten, but intact as a fighting force, they make contact with a shocked but relieved German rear echelon unit. Over the next 12 hours, the rest of the battalion, along with scattered elements from other units who had attached themselves to the breakout, trickle in. Against impossible odds, Lieutenant Brandt had extracted nearly 90% of his command from a nearly complete encirclement. They had brought out their wounded, their weapons, and their honor. They had not been merely defeated in a firefight, they had been strategically bypassed. And through initiative, superb reconnaissance, and iron discipline, they had refused the death sentence that maneuver intended to impose. The cost, however, was part of a much larger catastrophe. The 28th Jaeger Division, like the rest of the 4th Army, was soon engulfed by the Soviet offensive. The battalion's escape was a tactical success within an operational disaster. The Vistula-Oder offensive would become the Red Army's most powerful, rapid, and destructive advance of the war, crushing German resistance and carrying the Soviet tide to the gates of Berlin itself. The men of the 49th would continue to fight a desperate retreat across East Prussia, witnessing and enduring horrors beyond description. For his leadership and decisive action in extricating his battalion, Lieutenant Gerhard Brandt was later awarded the German Cross in Gold. Oberjäger Karl Vogel received the Iron Cross First Class for his critical reconnaissance. But their true legacy lies not in medals, but in the stark lesson of that silent morning of January 14, 1945. It demonstrated the evolution of Soviet operational art, their mastery of deep battle, of bypassing strong points, and of paralyzing an enemy not just with force, but with disorientation and strategic shock. The silence the Germans experienced was the sound of conventional frontline defense becoming obsolete. It was the sound of the next terrifying phase of the war on the Eastern Front, the war of mobility, encirclement, and utter annihilation. The men of the 49th Jaeger Regiment survived not by winning a battle, but by understanding in one critical moment that the battle they had prepared for was already over. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War, a moment where expectation clashed with a terrifying new reality in the frozen forests of the East. Subscribe to World War II Vault as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.